Hey everyone, welcome to the Get Your Life Together Girl podcast. I'm your host, Danielle Van. As a cognitive behavioral therapist, a life coach to women, and author, I've spent my life studying and learning from the stories that make us human. It's my passion and goal to help you shift your mindset and create a lifelong revolution to help you reach your greatest potential. There's a common misconception when it comes to loving ourselves that has been touted by self-proclaimed personal development gurus that is simply dead wrong. Many believe that loving ourselves is a one-off thing that we're supposed to, quote, do. Yet the truth is that self-love is the result of healing, growth, and putting all of the pieces of our greatest selves into place. Loving yourself isn't something that you're supposed to do. It is the thing that is the evidence of your growth. This week, we're taking a one-on-one deep dive into an essential life practice and habit that must be in place for you to reach ultimate self-love. What is it? It's self-trust. Together, we're breaking down what true self-trust is, how you may already have more trust than you've given yourself credit for, how your behavior diminishes trust, and then I'm handing over a blueprint to build unshakable trust. So let's shift our perspective and our ability to love ourselves. The Get Your Life Together Girl podcast starts right now. If you follow anyone on social media that does anything in therapy or personal growth or in the developmental realm, you have likely heard the term self-love. I mean, we just can't even escape it right now, right? I know I love to post and talk about self-love often, but there's a reason, right? So we need to have a deeper conversation about self-love and all of the elements that add to this experience of love, because that's what love is. Yes, it's an emotion, but it is an experience too. When I'm talking and working in private session, I often tell women that I want them to think of self-love as a vessel, right? A bowl, a collection point that is built from, molded by numerous things. Things like self-trust, respect, confidence, faith, belief, our personal beliefs, the thought process. This list is mighty, and it really does come down to a collection of things. If you see self-love as the experience, like I just said, we can start building on that list, on those things that really keep us from having it, and we can change our inner and outer thoughts, our feelings, and our actions to add to the collection, to the experience, to the bowl. Are you with me? Good. So self-trust is a fundamental habit, a process, element of not only confidence, but self-love itself. And let's be honest, it's tricky, even feels downright impossible at times to trust ourselves when we're full of doubt or have a lack mentality, meaning things just never work out for us, or live in a mindset and framework of negativity pretty much all the time. You know, when our inner conversations and our outer interactions, for that matter, sound more like I can't, nothing is working out, life just sucks. You know what I'm saying? You know, self-love really is a factor that we really struggle to get our arms around. We can't wrap our thought process around or our emotional wellness around, because this is the mindset in which we have, you know, this lack. Yet trust is an important factor in every relationship, especially the one with yourself. So if you want to love yourself, if you feel like things are not working out or you feel like you're stuck, it begins with these fundamental pieces. So let's dive in. Let's dive into the way that the lack of self-trust shows up in our lives, how it impacts us. And then I'm going to hand over a blueprint to building self-trust, whether you're doing it for the first time or you're returning to building your trust within. Doesn't matter where you are right now. This blueprint can help you really level up your life and level up your self-love. As always, If you listen to this podcast, I love a good definition. So we have to have a working definition, right? We have to be on the same playing field. So let's talk about what self-trust is. Many people see self-trust as just believing in ourselves, but it goes so much deeper than that. So self-trust is our ability to own our sense of self, which of course can be largely controlled by our thought process and our emotional body. It has the ability to really show us what we believe about ourselves. In self-trust, we know our level of self-awareness, and based on how much we trust or don't trust ourselves, it can also point to how much we accept ourselves, both in all positive aspects and negative aspects of ourselves. Self-trust, of course, doesn't mean that you're always going to think that you are right or that you'll never make a mistake. Instead, it means that you have the ability and allowance within each moment, with each movement of your life, to accept your faults, to accept any situations, your emotions, your thought processes. And here's the most important thing: to learn from them, right? It's also knowing that there is a safety factor within yourself. This is so important when it comes to trust. Think about the people that you trust in your life. Ultimately, what you're saying is, I trust my emotions, my physical self, my mental health, everything about me is safe with you. This is so important for us to really have this as a focal point for ourselves too. We don't talk about this. We don't think about this, but it is so imperative. If we understand that we are safe emotionally, mentally, physically, financially, spiritually, when a crisis occurs, whether it be a fight or a responsibility or, something big that happens, we then have no doubt that we have the ability to trust ourselves and move through the moment. That is safety. It is so important that you have the ability to say, I am safe with myself. That is self-trust. My hope is that you will begin to look for evidence in your life that you have more trust, self-trust, than perhaps you've ever given yourself credit for. And as we move through this conversation, I will be pointing out places where maybe your self-trust isn't high and needs just a little bit more attention. Or you're going to say to yourself, oh, actually, I've got that handled. And you can start to begin to give yourself some grace, some, credit for already having that active in your life. Because there have been times when you have hit rough patches. You just thought of one just as soon as I said that, right? Things have crashed down around you. You've had hard moments. And in those, you've instinctively, intuitively, and with firm action, have moved through those moments. Where do you think trust comes from? It's coming from being able to show up for yourself, for knowing that you are safe. Self-trust means that you refuse to give up on yourself, regardless of the situation. It's knowing that you can face any obstacle or challenge that's in your path. Hidden in our definitions are really some of the reasons why many people don't trust themselves. So let's dive into that really quickly. For many women, they simply are not attuned to their feelings, right? They have zero emotional intelligence. It's not like we were sitting in elementary school and our teachers were like, here, this is what this means. And this is what happiness is, and joy and anger. We didn't get that, right? You didn't necessarily have that in your home either if you didn't grow up with parents who have a set standard of emotional intelligence. And because of that, we just aren't attuned to what our feelings actually mean. Or, to make matters worse, we can add to that and say many women are not even attuned to the full scope of their needs. And so they tend to regulate themselves and their lives based on how others see them and how they are needed by other people. And this is where people pleasing becomes such a big issue. This is where self-trust is often so quickly broken. It's this false dichotomy of seeing the world through this black and white lens, this wanting of hope, of creating control, avoiding hard situations, emotional struggle, and even avoidance of showing up because someone else may need me. Right? Someone else may need to give me something that's going to help me feel safe. And the problem is, that's an inside job. It's never something to be given to us from an outside situation, an emotion, a person, an event. It is a personal standard, a personal practice, a habit. What's even more interesting is a lack of self-trust doesn't always show up in negative situations. This is something so important to point out because a lot of people will say, well, I don't really trust myself, or I really don't have any situations that are negative, so I probably have self-trust. But self-trust can show up in positive situations too. If they show up in two equally positive options and you struggle to make decisions, you probably don't trust yourself. Have you ever thought about that? You probably have said to yourself, well, I don't trust myself to make the right decision. Or what if I don't make the right decision? Or what if I pass up something because I thought something else was better? That is a lack of self-trust. That leads to our lack of self-love. And of course, the question is why? Why does that happen? Why is this in our thought process? And the first thing we have to do is to look at our past experiences. If you've had heavy negative experiences in your life, you are probably afraid that something's going to go wrong if you follow your heart, or if you listen to your gut, or you take chances. You may hold that idea that I don't really want to get comfortable because I'm waiting for the other shoe to drop. How many of you have said that? I know I hear it all the time in private session, more often than you think. It has many different alliterations of that sentence, but it all comes back to, I don't trust that things are really going to stay or maintain the way that they are because my past experience says things are going to fail. Things are going to be hard. Things are not trustworthy. I am not trustworthy. This keeps us in a state of holding ourselves back. It keeps us in a state of really being small. And we want to break that. We don't want to be small, right? You didn't come here to be small in your life. I say that all the time. And in private session, women will often nod and say, yeah. I've totally believe that, but I don't know how to get to this place where you are, Danielle, where you have come through and actually own your life. And it comes down to these fundamental pieces. It comes down to trust. It comes down to putting all of those big pieces together to create the vessel of loving ourselves, of loving our lives. So what are some of the other reasons why we don't trust ourselves? I want you to think about the last time you made a decision in your life where you have had a negative outcome, where you may have felt forced or felt like you just didn't have another option. Your back is to the wall and things didn't show up or turn out the way that you wanted them to. What happens? It's these moments that our trust is broken. And if we don't do the work to uncover why we made those choices, why we didn't look for another perspective, because no matter how dire a situation feels, there is always another solution. It comes back to several things that really need to be addressed. Without light, there is no darkness, right? So that is an opposite. Without contrast, we don't know what we want because we don't know what we don't want. And so we know that if there's always two dichotomies, that there's always more than one choice. There's always more than one outcome. And so if we don't do the work to uncover why we're not making those choices that will work for us, we really can break our trust. It's in these experiences that we wire in patterns of fear and anxiety that absolutely put a cap on our trust. There's another experience that can cause us to break our self-trust, and that experience it is probably the number one thing that I hear. I always say that, right? It's the number one thing that I hear, but it's because I hear them all so often in various orders that they all seem to bump up to number one because they're all related. But, this piece is that we are spending a lot of time in negative criticism. If you've been told by someone all of the negative things about yourself, it is to stand to reason that you believe those things. And it's also really not a far jump that you will then break the trust, the faith within yourself, because why would you believe those things, right? If all you hear are negatives, that is what you're going to wire in. Many of us have those people in our lives that love to focus on our weaknesses. They love to push our buttons. They love to offer constant reminders of the times that we've made mistakes. And if we listen to those negative comments long enough, guess what? Those become the tapes in our heads. It will influence your self-perception. It tanks your confidence. It breaks your trust. It becomes the factor in which you are, right? It becomes your mindset. And how we think is how we feel, and how we feel is how we act, and it is a cycle that continues. If we go a step beyond how we talk to ourselves or how others talk to us and how we wire in these patterns, we can look at yet another factor, and that factor is guilt. Guilt and shame are complete barriers to self-trust. When we feel guilty or we feel that we have blame, we immediately lean into negative emotions and thought processes. That same goes for shame. Trust is a positive emotion, right? You're never going to feel positive when you're living in negatives. It's not possible. Our rational mind cannot make the leap, right? We can't say, oh, I feel better when we feel like complete crap, right? And then all of a sudden our mindset shifts and we're like, yeah, we do feel good. That's like a ninja mindset that a lot of people do not have. Now, if you practice all of these elements enough and you're really clear about your thought process, it is possible to make that leap, but it's not likely if you haven't been doing this really deep, hard work. Of course, guilt and blame and the negative thought cycles and the negative conversations and all of these pieces that may have not worked out for us, they of course add up and become the reason why we don't trust ourselves. There are other factors, of course, and that really does come down to abusive relationships or destructive relationships, mental illness, addiction is a huge one, our traumas, our past experiences. All of these things make an impact on how we really trust ourselves. But we can change the narrative at any time. We can. We can move how these things impact us through the healing work, through really getting into this blueprint and diving into a place where we don't have to destroy our emotional health. We don't have to have a physical impact. We do not have to tank ourselves mentally. Instead, we can really get to a place where we are living our best lives. Because I want you to think about it. Mentally, people who struggle with self-trust tend to have much higher anxiety, depression, and guilt, right? Physically, studies have shown that there's a link between a lack of trust and sleeping difficulties. Here's why. When we don't trust our lives, ourselves, our experiences, what happens? We tend to ruminate over the big and small decisions that we have to make. And when does that most happen? It happens at night, right? When we're trying to shut our brains down, when we are alone or we are in the quiet. And it's a time during the day that it is most difficult for us to have reassurance from other people, which is going to cause that physical sleep issue. Of course, if we aren't sleeping, our anxiety is going to heighten, and it is a nasty cycle. And from there, we can impair our memory. We can have, heart problems, have greater cancer rates, and even metabolic issues like our blood pressure going up. This is so big. Self-trust is really this big of a factor in our lives. And I really want to get into how we can fundamentally create this space for self-love, how we can really create an impact of building this awareness of ourselves. So let's dive into that blueprint. Let's get right to it. The first pathway in our blueprint is to tune into your needs and your instincts. Like I said in the beginning, many women do not have a full understanding of their emotions. They do not have a full understanding of their needs. And if they do, they aren't prioritizing them. And even if we try to build trust on top of those lacks, we can't do it. So if we want to begin to build self-trust, we have to really look at how we become more attuned. We can dive into those 4 questions I often hand over. If you've listened to this podcast or you've heard me speak or you follow me on Instagram or TikTok or Facebook. And those 4 questions are, what do I want? Deep down, what do I want? What desires do I have? What hunger and thirst for more is inside of me? What do I want? The next question, how do I want to feel? I want you to think about this. How is it that I want to emotionally, mentally, physically, spiritually, even financially feel? Do I feel like something's lacking? Do I need to get down into what my emotions mean? How do I want to feel? Do I want to feel courageous, trustworthy, joyful, happy, excited, negative, angry, upset, misplaced? How do I want to feel? It's such an important question. The next question, what do I need? Between your wants and feelings, what do you need? Deep down, beyond self-trust, self-love, and even confidence and self-esteem, what do you really need in those other 2 elements of how you feel and what you want? This is so important. What do I need? A lot of people, when I ask this question, they'll say, well, I just need for people to do as I ask them to. Okay, well, that's not something that is going to build your self-trust. That is an outside desire of wanting someone to show up under your expectation, right? It's a totally different thing. And a lot of times people will not meet that need as you want them to. It's just not within their wheelhouse. So, what do you need from yourself in order for you to feel like you can trust yourself at all times? Big question. It's something we have to look at. The last question is, how will I get there? And this is where we begin to plan, right? What steps do I need to take to allow myself to tune in and to give myself permission to know that I can and must process my life and be the driver of my own decisions? Because if you are driving your life, guess what? You are trusting your life. You're trusting yourself. A great way to start this process of tuning in is to get quiet. Go beyond journaling, beyond working with me or another therapist, and just sit with situations that have occurred in your life. And instead of immediately seeking outside advice, begin to weigh your options in that moment. It's sort of the whole pros and cons list that we've stepped away from as adults. We did it as kids, right? We would fold the paper in half and would say cons and pros. If I like him or I like her, then this is how I will feel and this is what will occur. You can do that, right? You can do that now as an adult. It is such a great practice when you're building self-trust, because what you're doing is you're allowing yourself to see all options, right? To see the perspective of what is before you. So get out that piece of paper and go through the cons and pros list through the 4 questions. What do I want? How do I want to feel? What do I need? How will I get there? This immediately opens the door to self-awareness. And with awareness comes trust. The last question of how am I going to get there, again, offers that plan. And remember that old saying, where there is a will, there is a way. This is a hallmark statement of self-trust. I know that you can really put that into your mindset and begin to say, what is it that I really need to be addressing within myself in order to really build this avenue of trust? So step 2 in our blueprint to self-trust is you must feel your feelings, right? So there's a reason why we begin to look at what our feelings mean ahead of time, because we can't feel what we don't understand. It may, come to us in a way that we're like, oh, that is this emotion and I'm feeling this, but it could be something completely different. I want you to understand you have to feel your feelings at all times. When something comes in, we cannot reject it and push it away and say, thank you, next. We have to identify what it is. Self-trust is powerful, and so is self-neglect. Did you hear me? Do I need to say that again? Because I will. Self-trust is powerful, and so is self-neglect. So many of you are afraid to feel your feelings because that inner critic, the subconscious, wants to keep you safe. It wants to say, everything's fine, the situation could get worse, and so if it does, that's going to feel too much. And I don't want to feel too much, so we're just going to stay where we are. Remember, the subconscious doesn't like to change. It doesn't like new patterns. It likes what you originally told it, good or bad. And yet it doesn't want us to experience discomfort. And so if it sees this discomfort as a low-level discomfort, it's always going to offer you that. It wants you to be okay by any means necessary. And that can also mean by keeping everything at bay. Change is scary. Your subconscious doesn't like it. And yet you have to realize that this never works. It never does. It spins you into an epidemic of a life filled with negativity. It kills your relationships. It hinders your progress. It's sort of the laughing at the face of personal growth. If you can accept your emotions, you are giving yourself the ability to build trust. Think about when trust is broken in your outside relationship. Somebody doesn't keep a promise. Someone doesn't meet an expectation. Someone doesn't show up for you in a way that you wish they would emotionally. This is the same thing. When you reject your emotions, when you refuse to feel, you're doing the same thing to yourself. An exercise I often make women do is to really work with the emotional scale. You can go onto Google and print out an emotional scale worksheet. If you are a Women's Circle member, there is one there for you with an explanation of how to use it. So you can sign up and find that there. But really what you can do is just Google it and then begin to write out your definition of each emotion. What does fear mean? What does anger mean? What does sadness mean? Joy, happiness, it doesn't matter what it is, write it out. What does it mean to you? My definitions are going to be based on my experiences, and so they're going to be different than your definitions. So what do your emotions mean to you? And that way you can accept them, right? When you know your definitions, you can really get into a place that you can say, I get what this is, and I can trust myself to handle it. When you know what you're dealing with, isn't it easier to trust yourself? I mean, at least it is for me. I hope it is for you too. Rationally, it should be. As you accept your emotions, you can start looking at how certain people, feelings and situations can trigger your lack of trust. Maybe you feel like experiencing love isn't safe, that you don't trust love, that love isn't good to you, that you're not worthy of it. And you have to really question why. How did I get here? Why do I feel this way? Is it because of a past experience? The answer is probably yes. But the other question, the other piece to put into place so that you can build self-trust is to begin to ask, is every situation going to be the same? Will I experience what I experienced in my last relationship, in the last experience of love, that I will likely experience now? And the answer is no. You will not experience the same thing unless you are dealing with the exact same person and circumstance, right? If that's the case, then the answer is yes. But if the answer is no, you have to realize that all of the elements, all of them, have to be the same in order to get the same results. If you're not having a relationship with the same person in the same time, with the same mindset, in the same state of being, things, my friend, will not be the same. You have to ask, can I look at this in a different way? Can I accept my feelings? Can I define my emotions? Once I do, I'm willing to really lean into trusting myself. And that's where we move into blueprint piece number 3. We have to stop setting unrealistic goals. And this doesn't matter whether we're talking about, emotional goals or physical goals or mental goals or spiritual goals or financial goals. It does not matter. We have to stop setting unrealistic goals. As a former perfectionist, I will say I was the queen of setting overachieving, unrealistic goals. And when I didn't hit them, guess what? It tanked my thought process and my ability to see myself as successful. When you can't see that your life is working out for you, what happens? You become anxious, sad, at the very least, untrusting of yourself and your abilities. For a lot of people, they fall into depression. You can be the greatest person, living your greatest life, doing all the things. But if you don't trust yourself to create your desires, no matter what happens, nothing will feel fulfilling to you. Both the long-term and short-term goals, no matter what they are, they have to fall into our 5 areas of growth to make them achievable. Again, it goes back to those questions. If you set vague, pie in the sky, fail every time goals, what are you telling your subconscious? You're telling your subconscious, you are not worthy. I cannot do anything. I might as well not try because nothing works out. I'm a loser. No one cares about me. No one will care if I succeed. No one loves me. What do I have to offer? What can I possibly share that's going to make a difference? Have you ever said those words to yourself? So many women do, and those thoughts are a direct result of showing up without self-trust. Again, go back to those questions. What do I want? How am I going to get there? Divide your goals into daily, weekly, monthly, small tasks, and celebrate the heck out of every single victory along the way. You can mark off everything on your to-do list, but I want you to celebrate every single thing that you do. I want you to live it up when you hit those monthly goals. I want you to feed your brain with such knowledge, of such capability that says, you know what? I trust myself. I know that I can show up for myself. I know that I can love myself because I know I can care for myself mentally, emotionally, spiritually, physically, and financially. And if I don't know that, I sure as hell know that I can make it possible. Think about that. That's radical self-trust, right? Step 4 on our blueprint is to be kind to yourself. This is a big one. You've heard me say it a million times, and I'm here to say it again. The way you speak to yourself, the way you speak about yourself, the way you show up for yourself, it matters. It is the pattern that you're telling your brain to follow. If you are over-criticizing yourself, guess what? The brain says, yep, that's how we're going to be. If you put everything in an effort of perfectionism, you're going to kill the greatness of everything around you. If you reduce your urge to show up, you're not going to get much out of your efforts. Right? If you heard me talk with Jackie Latran, a good friend of mine and confidence coach last week in the episode on confidence, I'm going to link that here in the show notes for you in case you missed it or you're new around here. Welcome. I talked with her about this practice that we both use in our practice, where we ask these women and people that are working with us to carry around a notebook and write down every negative thought that you have. Give yourself a time period. Start with 24 hours and then start with 3 days and then start with 5 and then go an entire week and write down every negative thought that you have. This is so eye-opening, and it helps us look at our inner dialogue. It helps us to become aware of the conversations, and it helps us to know where are these little trigger points within us that are killing our self-trust. Do it, right? Become clear about what's happening within you and offer yourself some kindness. How? How can we offer ourselves kindness? You have to give yourself grace. Grace meaning that you allow yourself to make mistakes, that you are willing to be in full fluid motion of growth, that you're willing to learn, to discover, that you don't beat yourself up for what you don't know. Because without self-kindness, there is no trust. You're never going to be able to be nasty to yourself and then find yourself saying, yep, I trust that I've got my own back. It's not possible. So you have to give yourself kindness. Step 5, I want you to be open with what's on your mind. Again, I told you before, you did not come here to be small. So often when we've had abuse in our background or our childhood was really chaotic, we have learned to keep our opinions, our beliefs, and our thoughts to ourselves. We've been told, be good girls, and nothing's going to be a problem. Be small, and everything's going to be okay. But you didn't come here to be small. You didn't come here to keep your thoughts and your beliefs to yourselves. I'm not saying you have to broadcast them and force them on people. That's not at all what I'm saying. I'm saying sometimes we are afraid to be seen because we are afraid of having this openness about ourselves. And when we're afraid to be seen, it impacts our self-trust levels in a very negative way. You have to be willing to stop holding yourself back. You cannot live an authentic life without vulnerability. It's just not possible. If you feel strongly about something, speak up. Do it with the people that you trust. In fact, I want you to test the waters, right? Maybe there's a situation that's going on in your friend group or your, family circle that you really need to address, but you're afraid of really upsetting someone or rocking the boat. I want you to start small, and I want you to use language that is focused around the I factor, not the you factor. So when we get upset or we're not open with our minds or we don't trust ourselves, we often will use the word you. You make me feel this way. You are doing this. When this happens, you do that. And I want you to change the narrative to I. I feel this way. I feel when this situation occurs, this happens. I. Turn it back on yourself. Trust yourself to be open. I feel, I need, I want. This is how I am getting there. If you don't feel like you can do it with the people that you trust, do it on paper, right? If you don't have a community or a group or it just be, too much for you, then go to your paper and speak to a coach or a therapist. But whatever you have to do, stop holding yourself back. The deal is this: most people are far more open than we give them credit for, right? They appreciate your thoughts. They want to have an understanding of your desires or to understand why you think the way that you do. So just pick your audience wisely, especially if you're in the very beginning stages of building your trust or you're doing it again. And just be open. What's on my mind? How do I want to feel? How am I going to get there? Step 6 in our blueprint is to listen to yourself. Like 5 and 6 feel pretty interchangeable, right? So the order doesn't really matter here, but I want you to know that you have to listen to yourself, and it is an important factor of building trust. Just like we avoid our emotions and it wrecks our self-trust, being unwilling to listen to our inner thoughts and our desires can really cause the same thing. So you have to make an effort to sit in silence, to listen to what's happening within your mind, to listen to your thoughts, to witness your feelings, especially when they are feelings that are unnerving or unending to you. Really get into a place of trying to hear what's happening within you and process those things from every angle. Again, it goes back to those 4 questions. Why am I thinking this way? What is it that I'm thinking? Is this my truth? How am I going to feel? Is this impacting me positive or negatively? Is this thought process serving me? Is this building my trust? Listening to yourself, listening to what you know to be your inner truth, your inner wisdom builds trust. When you reject it is when you realize that you are letting that self-trust go. Plus, the more positive outcomes that you witness, the more likelihood that you will build greater self-trust. Remember, negative gives us negative results. Positive thinking gives us positive results. What is self-trust? It's a positive aspect. So blueprint step number 7 is actually one of my favorites because everything we're doing as far as building self-trust falls under this, and it is to take risk in your lives. Now, I'm not talking about jumping from an airplane. I'm not talking about doing the things that scare the absolute hell out of you, right? That are unnecessary. I'm talking about showing up. I'm talking about speaking your mind. I'm talking about doing the things that have really kept you from living your best experiences, because fear, it's always going to hold you back. You can stay in the same place, the same patterns, the relationships, honestly dealing with the same BS because it seems easier than really walking out into the wilderness of your life alone. And so you have to say, am I willing to live as my best self? If this is a risk, am I willing to take it? The answer should always be yes. If you don't trust yourself, you don't take risk. You have to be willing to say, am I okay with things turning out differently than I expect? Am I okay if things don't turn out perfectly? Am I open? Can I step out of these small boxes I put myself in? Am I afraid? Or am I willing to learn? What happens when a risk does not unfold in a negative way? What happens when something that you choose to do, even if your hands are shaking, turns out to be really fantastic? Well, suddenly you have the motivation to keep impacting yourself in positive ways, right? This is growth. This is essential to self-love. It's essential to expansion. It is an absolute must if you want to experience your life on the next level. So I encourage you, take risk. Write down the things that you feel are so risky right now and go back to those 4 questions. How do I want to feel? What do I need? What do I want? How will I get there? And begin to put these risks down on paper. Next up, number 8, you have to learn to forgive yourself. It's here where a lot of people say, nope, too far. Not going to do that work. No, thank you. Because doing self-trust work for many women really is very difficult, right? Because they've spent far too long living inside of their disappointments. They've punished themselves for so long that they don't even know what it looks like to trust themselves. But understand, sometimes we don't know what we know until we're ready to really put it into full activity in our lives. Meaning, we may have had these experiences a million times over, but all of a sudden one day something clicks, right? The light bulb goes off, and then suddenly we're like, oh, I get it. All right, I'm ready to forgive that this occurred. I've really spent way too much mental space on this one thing. I'm going to let it go. I'm going to really lean into it and make amends with it and radically change how I see this moment, because I need to forgive in order to trust all of my experiences, myself, my emotions, my thoughts from here on out. A beautiful way to do this is to look at your experiences and pull on the lessons of the moment. You begin to ask, what happened? Write it down. What did I learn from that? Write that down. What would be different in my life if that experience had not occurred? This is a big one because a lot of times we don't look at our negative experiences as positive motivators, and often they are. Someone asked me recently, what was one of the hardest experiences that you have had that changed your life in a positive way? And the answer rolls off my tongue every single time. Those answers are my daughter being in kidney failure, the loss of my stepmom, the loss of my father-in-law within 7 days of each other, me having a very negative emotional experience thereafter of those 3 experiences. Those were very negative experiences that I had happen in my life, but you know what? They taught me. They began to become the positive motivator for the reason why I do this work now. If that wasn't a period of growth, I don't know what it was. It was the building of trust. It was the exercise of, Danielle, are you ready? Are you prepared? You think you want this one thing, but I'm going to show you how beautiful your life will be if you will just let go, if you will just forgive yourself for your response, if you will lean in, if you will listen, and if you will just trust. Trust yourself, trust the outside world, just trust. Even if you screw up, even if you fail, if you allow yourself to learn, you do not lose. You just grow. You just trust. When you know that you can handle failure, you positively increase your capability of trusting yourself no matter how hard the situation is. This is a very beautiful thing. Next up, number 9, be committed to yourself. This is a very difficult one for a lot of women, and it is still a must. A beautiful client of mine recently asked me, how do you do so much in your life and live the way that you do? And the answer again rolls right off the tongue, and it is that I am radically committed to myself. First and foremost, above all else. What does that mean? It means I keep my promises. It means that I make promises to myself. It means that I show up. And that is what it means for you too. It means that you know you can handle yourself in every situation and that you will do whatever it is that you need to do to make that possible. It means that you live your life in a way that you look for evidence for the commitments that you make. Meaning, I have made a commitment. I'm going to do this. I have now the evidence that I can do it. That builds self-trust. List out the promises that you make. List out the things that you want to do. Go back to question number 4 and create a commitment plan. How will I get there? Are you willing to trust yourself and show up? This is wildly simple. So important though. The next piece of our puzzle is stop number 10, and that is to pay attention to your results. Whenever you're working on something, pay attention to what unfolds. Results and outcomes are really important to understanding your performance and your strength, right? This is where self-trust is built. Break things down. How did I get here? Did I process my emotions in a positive way? How did I handle the experience? Take time and guide yourself to work on these areas, especially those areas that you feel like are weak and you need a fresh start within those things. Give yourself the ability to see that you are able to build worthiness and trust in your life. Blueprint number 9, be more responsible to yourself. Again, this goes back to paying attention to your results, keeping your promises. The more responsible you are, the more you build self-appreciation. This develops faith, which of course, faith turns into trust. Set boundaries with your time. Ask yourself, will this help me or will this hinder me? Will this help me develop my own needs? Am I adding to someone else but not myself? Very important. Be responsible to yourself so that you can build your greatest self-trust. Blueprint number 10. We only have 2 more left, so hang with me. We've arrived at this place that you have to give yourself rewards when you begin to live a trustworthy life. Rewarding yourself emotionally, mentally with good thoughts, physically in the way that you treat yourself is something that will always motivate you to do more, to be more positive, to do good. Every time you do something for yourself, reward yourself with some sort of appreciation. This can be very simple. I'm not talking about going out and buying yourself something. I'm saying offer yourself some gratitude. I'm so thankful that I took the time to show up for myself. That is a reward. This will increase your confidence level. This will increase your self-trust. Step 11, really take a very good hard look at your strengths. Can you witness your strengths? There's something you believe about yourself that you know you are wildly capable of, right? There is. And don't say that you don't, right? Because everyone has at least 1 to 15 things, and I really do mean that, 1 to 15 things, that they know very internally that it is a strength. Maybe it is that you're good at handling other people's emotions, or maybe you're really good at knowing when someone is not well, or whatever it is. I want you to take time and to get very clear about your strengths. Write them down. Give yourself a strength list. List it out. Give yourself permission to appreciate these things about yourself. Focus on what you love about yourself, what you're good at, what you're worthy of, and give yourself that just extra boost to put it on paper. This is my strength. Strength 1, strength 2, 3, 4. Write it down. Don't do it with judgment. Just really do it from a place of openness, vulnerability, and even courage if that's what is required of you at that moment. What are your strengths? You have them. When you know your strength, you can build your trust. When you know your strength, you are able to really love yourself more. Lastly, our last stop is to be yourself, right? Don't pretend to be someone else or something that you're not just to please someone else. The more you act like someone else, the more that impacts your confidence, and your faith in yourself is always going to be negatively impacted. So have some faith in yourself and try to really be your full self in front of everyone, right? Trust yourself enough that you know who you are. You've already walked through this blueprint. You've built awareness. You know your needs. You know what your emotions mean. You know how to show up. You know what your strengths are. You can trust yourself to be who you are. It's an honor to be you. There's not another soul on this earth that has every quality that you have. So it's time to own it, right? Own all of it. And when you do, you're building unshakable trust. Self-trust is an honor. It's a privilege that should not be taken lightly. You know, each of these elements have the ability to move you into a place where you thrive, not only in trust, but in all of the other pieces that help us build self-love. If we don't trust ourselves, we can't be confident. If we don't trust ourselves, we don't have self-respect. If we don't trust ourselves, we don't really step out of our boxes. We don't have progress and growth. I want you to realize how important self-trust is. Because once you put all of these pieces of the blueprint together and you give your full understanding to it, and you realize that you can overcome anything, you give yourself permission to freely show up as the most authentic, truest, most beautiful person. All of these are necessary. All of these pieces are pieces that create life-changing movements. So put your blueprint in place. Build your self-trust. I dare you. I dare you to look at your life and put all of these elements in place. I dare you to be brave. I dare you to build trust in yourself. And as you moved through those pieces, I bet you realize that there are things that you already have in place that you do right now that are already trustworthy, right? Because a lot of times when we go through this blueprint and I ask women, do you do that? They'll say, absolutely. And so you can look at yourself and say, you know what? There's only maybe 1 or 2 of these factors that I need to elevate. And I already do trust myself. And that is a beautiful thing. The blueprint is, of course, to help you build, but it's also there to help you realize you're already living these beautiful expressions of self-trust. Again, it is an honor and something you should not take lightly. So put it into place. It is an essential element to getting and keeping your life together, girl. Thank you so much for listening to the Get Your Life Together Girl podcast. If you've enjoyed these tips for bettering your life, please turn on notifications to be alerted each week when a new episode is released. If you're seeking daily inspiration and additional tools and tips, you can follow me on social media at Get Your Life Together Girl on Instagram, Facebook, or TikTok. You can visit the show notes and blog and my website at getyourlifetogethergirl.com. I also want to personally invite you to check out the Get Your Life Together Girl Women's Circle. There's already 100 downloadable tools and practices available within the circle. It's updated weekly and available to you right now for only $9 a month. Visit getyourlifetogethergirl /women's-circle to learn more and to sign up. Until next time, be kind to yourself and others.